Hello everyone and welcome back on the channel. Sorry, it's been a while. I simply didn't have enough time to make lots of videos, but I'm about to show you one of those openings. It's called Nimzowitsch opening. That is not so common in practice, but you usually have lots of problems with it. Probably it's because, I don't know, lack of videos about that. You don't know how to approach these systems, and that's why you're here on the channel. So let's get started. Let's immediately go there. Thank you all for donations. We keep getting these donations, and it's very nice, and I see that you actually appreciate very much this work. Thanks so much, and let's go. Nimzowitsch opening happens after e4 knight c6, and here my vote goes to knight f3. To all those who played the bishop's opening, and you guys are interested in playing the bishop's opening even against e4 knight c6, you should be going with e4 knight c6 and second move knight c3. Knight c3 is going to be aimed against d5. Knight c3 is going to give them possibility to go with e5, in which case you play bishop c4 and even offer them copycat. Now those who play e6, you just have to know this variation against whenever French with early e5, and those who play second move d6, you just go d4 and transpose into the analysis that are going to be subject of today's lecture. So after e4 knight c6, my vote goes to knight f3. Simply, I'm happy to go with the knight on f3. If they go with e5, then you can choose whether you want to play Italian, whether you want to play Scotch opening, do you want to play Rai Lopez, that maybe 4 knights, that depends on you. Definitely you can play bishop's opening if that's the case, but that's why I told you, whoever is interested in bishop's opening, after e4 knight c6, play knight c3 followed by bishop c4. My vote after e4 knight c6 goes for knight f3, and here we already have a couple of deviations by black. Deviations go in the following directions. They can play f5, which is called Colorado Gambit. They can play d5, which is Scandinavian, but specific Scandinavian because they play with the knight on c6. And finally, there is one more line in this position. It's d6, which is typical Nimzowitsch opening. Let's get started with Colorado Gambit. Colorado Gambit, it's common, and there are guys who actually like to do it. It was way more popular before. I believe I even published the video how to play against the Colorado Gambit here on the channel, but nowadays it's not a problem. Of course you should take on f5, and when they play d5 in order to capture, all you have to remember about the Colorado Gambit is the following plan. You pin the knight and the king, so when they play bishop f5, you play knight e5, pinning the knight on c6 and the king again, and when they play queen d6, you just go with d4, maintaining control of the center, knight on e5 and everything else. But at the same time, if they go with a6, unfortunately we can't take on c6 by knight, so we play bishop c6, and you're not interested in pawn. You're interested in good control of the dark squares and keeping the knight on e5, like in Nimzowitsch book My System, where the knight on e5 just controls everything. Then there is a line with bishop d7. If they go back here, no, you shouldn't go with the queen h5. There are lines that are considered to be bad for us. We first take on c6. Now they have pretty bad bishop on c6, which is inactive piece. Castles, knight f6, rook e1, supporting the knight on e5, playing d4 in the center, taking on c6, for example, taking on e6, or playing even knight c3. But in general, as long as you control the dark squares, and especially e5 outpost, your game looks good. And that's what you have to do, and that's what you have to remember about the Colorado Gambit. So once again, whoever goes for Colorado Gambit, take it, play bishop b5, I insist on this move again, and jump with the knight on e5. It's already enough to have like a very, very solid advantage, and they're already going to hate their opening choice. Then they have Scandinavian, but they have a weird Scandinavian opening with the knight on c6. Of course you should take. of course you should attack the queen. There was an IM on chess.com, Michael Boyer from France, who constantly keep playing against me queen h5 here. Of course the move should be queen a5, but he constantly kept playing queen h5. I believe after I found this knight b5, which is really nice, where he can't go with the queen on e5 because there is knight on f3 to defend, where he can't defend c7 anyhow but king d8. I don't want to discuss this position. I just want to tell you this is an easy game, and what is it like so much better? Who's gonna play with a king on d8? But that guy played nearly 50 games with a king on d8. But of course, the main principle in that type of position is what? So you're not supposed to do anything else but play aggressively, active, open up the game, and take advantage of the king being in the center, specifically here on d8. That's what I wanted to tell you about this position. So it's time for the next variation. So let's go with just don't forget about this one. Let's go with the queen a5. Whoever plays queen a5, you just have to know that a knight on c6 is very annoying. It's very annoying because it gives them some bishop g4, a long castle, and those kinds of ideas in this position. In order not to be surprised with this, you should be going with bishop e5, pinning the knight and the king, and after bishop d7, short castle, long castle, and play d4, absolutely breaking in the center. So when you play d4, you're just taking a nice game in the center, and now they just have to decide. For example, there are like numerous of games that I played where the guys immediately forced me to come up with my move and decision whether I want to keep the light square bishop, retreat it somewhere, or take on c6. Of course, I say of course, because I'm familiar with this type of ideas, you should go with this. Then you should play knight e5, harassing the bishop on c6, and pawn on f7. And then when they go bishop e8, top move comes here. It's b4, believe it or not. And that type of idea with the king on c8, chasing the queen away, has to be remembered. Any queen b6 should be defended with the bishop e3. You're always happy when they take on b4. You're overprotecting d4 and then carry on with the game. If they play queen b4, threatening both on d4 and c3, you just play queen f3. You're defending on c3, threatening rook b1, going after the b7 and the queen. And at the same time, you're just making some sort of pressure on f7. You don't care about the pawn on d4. I'd call this a poison pawn, so they can't take it so easily. And if they go c6, I won, I believe, 5 games, rook b1, queen d4, and just bishop f4. And I'll get ready for, I don't know, rook f to d1, knight e5, sorry, knight a4, knight c6, even some sort of nice mating ideas there, but in general this is like completely winning for white. Because of that, I believe that way more logical should be knight f6, but then you play a4. a4 is not only with the point of defending the bishop, but more importantly, you want to now chase that queen away. And when they go with like e6, for example, they just want to, I don't know, like develop this. e5, you don't care. You just take and take on e5, and you're clearly up a pawn. a6, you don't care. You play bishop d2. a takes, queen b6. You don't play rook a8 because of knight b8, so you play b takes, bishop 6, check, knight e8, knight e5, sorry, rook d8, and knight f7. You're winning a rook, and you're winning a game. Okay, maybe this and the previous sequence, I just went a little bit faster, but it was forcing one. And after e6, you go bishop d2, bishop b4, knight a2, knight d2, and now you're gonna chase that queen away. How? Either with c3 and b4, chasing the queen away, or knight c4, chasing that queen like this. Queen is pretty much jeopardized. If queen b6, you play c3, knight c4. I played few games like this. Why do I play like this? Because I'm repositioning my knight from a2 to c1 and d3. It goes towards the center, controls both of these squares, controls everything. And what is like so much better? If knight e5, you just take bishop b5, a takes, rook d2, queen e1, and knight is hanging, b4 is threatened, and they're just completely lost. Just like you see I briefly showed you how should you play against Colorado Gambit and Scandinavian with the knight on c6. That's why I'm of opinion when you play against Nimzowitsch opening, sorry, that most of these guys would go with d6. And that somehow, I would say, a spirit of this opening to go with d6. There is a guy from my city who always goes with this and always plays bishop g4, FIDE master Terzic. It could be very annoying if you don't know what to do, and to be honest with you, took me pretty a while to learn how to play these positions, and nowadays I'm just having like a very nice good results and games with it. So what's happening here? When this happens, we should be going with d4, and there we go. They can play knight f6, which is the main move, and they can play sideline bishop g4. Developing this bishop on g4 is kind of very annoying move, because they instantaneously trying to put some pressure on d4, develop this bishop and complete development of e6. And usually this Nimzowitsch system and this early third move bishop g4 is played by those who would like to avoid like long theoretical lines and stuff like that. Here I'm just going to briefly show you one plan. I'm going to show you the most direct approach with d5, and that's the trickiest approach by white. But if you want to play nice, solid positional game with white pieces without learning so much theory, just go with bishop b5 immediately. So any bishop g4, you play bishop b5. Whenever they go a6, you take. You play h3, forcing them to take, but nobody's going to take. And you play knight c3 and bishop g5. There is a game of Peter Lacko who played like this. He easily won his game against Grandmaster Teske, and I very much like this positional approach. For example, in that game was rook b8. He captured here, played rook b1, played queen d3, unpinning his queen and the knight, taking by queen, and Peter Lacko went with this knight all the way onto the king's side against the bishop, and of course the knight was dominating over not only bad bishop but also pretty weak and broken pawn structure in the black's game. So I already showed you how can you play this, but at the same time I just have to show you the most critical approach. It's d5. d5 consists of one very nice trick in this position. It's knight d5. Basically, when you play d5, they have to go with the knight b8. You know what? I believe that many of your opponents will make a serious mistake and play knight e5. Then you just take this knight, take a look at this queen sack, and play bishop b5. Zillions of games I won with this trick. So when they take, you take by pawn. Now they don't have a6 because of c7, and if they go queen a5 check to save the queen, you just say, okay buddy, I'll play knight c3. And just at the moment when they say, okay, but what if now long castles, you just go knight c4. Only move for the queen is queen c7. Don't forget, if queen before you have a3, queen c5, bishop a3, queen goes here, you give check, and you go rook d1. You have two pieces and for the queen, but they have like so many problems, and for minor pieces you can even involve the rook d5 and so on into the action. Here you just go with this knight a5, rook b4, rook a4, depending on circumstances on the board. If knight c4, they go with the queen c7, you just play knight a5. And now if they go queen is trapped. So I believe if you ever play this position, everybody will try to save the queen. You just chase the queen away, play bishop a3, take on b7 to spoil the king, and play rook to d1. What is completely winning. I know you won't believe at first glance, like, what the hell are you showing this to us? We only have like bishop and knight and the pawn for the queen, but is it enough? Of course it's enough. First of all his pieces are on the back rank and undeveloped. Queen is on the rim of the board, and finally you're just involving your rook into the action and go after the king on b7. That's the thing, and that's how we have to play there. Apart from knight e5, there is one more mistake, but this mistake is not based on typical tactical thing here. but it's giving up the bishop pair. And when they take like this, you just take by queen. Now you have the bishop pair. You gotta be a lot better. And now when they play knight e5, you just play queen to b3, threatening on b7. They gotta defend it, kick the knight away with f4. And when you play like that, play bishop to e3, knight c3, bishop e2, g4. So what do you have? You have a bishop a pair advantage. You have fantastic pawns in the center, and everything seems to be looking great for white in this position. And finally, in this position, apart from bishop f3, there is a thing with knight b8. Of course, that I have to play knight b8, and I told you that in the beginning of this line. You just go with h3. You instantly want to ask them whether they want to give it up or maybe go back with this bishop on h5. I always believe that going with the bishop on h5 should somehow be better for black, but then you just go g4, chase it away, defend on e4, and play queen e2. With the move queen e2, I want to play h4, I want to chase the light square bishop away, and afterwards I can show you like lots of games, e5, h4, h5, g5, and you just chase that bishop away, and you just have a nice space control. Afterwards, you can play bishop e3 long castles or bishop d2 long castles. Bishop, light square bishop may go on h3. What is so much better? Most of these guys will take, queen takes f3, and when they go knight f6, I especially like the following approach. Having the bishop pair advantage and having the queen on f3 gives us, not only in this type of position, not only in Scandinavian, in Slav defense when you play d4, always the same approach. In some Philidor positions, g4. You always take space. You always want to go with g5, chasing that knight away on f6 with g5, and weakening the pawn on f7. So when you play g4, if they go h6, h4. I want to play g5. My queen is defending the rook, which is also of great importance in many of these positions. So after they go g4, g6, you just go with h4. And most of us would ask, okay, we all know that when we play like in this position h4, we all know that if h6, we should be going with g5. h takes, queen takes. You just have the bishop pair advantage. You have better development. You have control of the light squares. You have queen that can go straight into their position, but also defends the game. So what is so much better? But what if h5? Then you just go with this, g5, kicking the knight away. Knight g4, looks like they have this knight that may go on e5. Queen c3, threatening the rook. Knight e5 doesn't work now because of f4 and you win the piece. So they gotta go with rook g8. And now you say, okay, now I'm interested in f3. Now knight, instead of being so good on e5, it looks kind of shaky. You play bishop e2 with the ideas of f4, maybe kicking that knight away, maybe bishop e3, knight e2, queen b3, and stuff like that. After queen f3, if they go knight d7, I don't want to suggest you anything else, but once again g4, which is in general aimed against knight f6 by black afterwards. All things considered, this is like very, very nice position for white. And it's time for the main line. The main line, if they don't go for the third move, bishop g4, but they go knight f6, you will always go knight c3. Here I just have to show you a few deviations. Main move is bishop g4, but what happens if they go g6? This is nothing else but weird pierts that used to be popular. Even Kramnik played it once in a while. And here I have a very nice game between strong GM from Austria, Markus Rager, and my ex-student Denis Kadric, 2600 GM. So this was a very interesting game, a very lovely approach by Rager, who played bishop e3, queen d2. Now we're just, like leaning on the variation that I covered in one of my videos. It's called Modern Approach Against the Pierts. Find it, or Modern Approach Against Modern. Find it somewhere with this bishop e3, queen d2. It's a very, very lovely system for white. Here, you just go with the bishop e3, queen d2. In the modern fashion, you're not afraid of any g4 because you would always have bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, g5, and playing like this, in which case you can play d5 and undermine these pawns. And that's why after you play queen d2, they just have to go with castle. Rager played d5. Kadric played knight b8. I just have to remind you of the fact that if they play knight e5, Predojevic outplayed Zubov with f3, played long castles, and it's always nice when you have a game like this with the pawn structure. They always have lots of problems with their development and how to complete their game. So Predojevic was a lot better here. After d5, knight b8, Rager played bishop h6, played h3 to avoid any bishop g4, played g4. So now you see another point. It's not only avoiding bishop g4, but it also gives you g4 yourself. After a6, g4, bishop h6, queen h6, and played knight g5. And for example, this reminds me of many of these puzzles where you just need to remove this knight in order to finish them off on h7. When the guy played the e5, d takes e6, going for distraction knight e5 idea, h4, now you can't play this because of mate. Now you can take by bishop because of knight d5, so h4 was a move of great potential. Rook a7 wants to send a message, even if you play h5, buddy, that's not gonna be anything that special because I'm going to recapture and my rook on a7 is gonna defend on f7, h7, sorry. That's a very nice defensive approach for many of you when it happens, just to have that as some sort of like, like kind of to be resilient in your defense and kind of resourceful with this type of moves. Rook a7. After they go with the bishop g4, you just play knight e5, typical distraction. They gotta go rook e8, and when this guy played c7, uncovering, like control of this, rook c7 took, played knight h7, and just like you see, Rager won against Kadric in 20 moves in a brilliant attack. That's why I'm telling you, these are very specific type of Scandinavians that happen out of Nimzowitsch opening, Peart's defense, always with that knight on c6, which is kind of committal by black, and that actually helps us. When they play bishop g4, you will play bishop to e3. It's very important to play bishop to e3 because bishop on g4 pinned the knight and kind of weakened the pawn on d4. That's why you play bishop e3, over protecting and control of the d4 pawn. So after bishop e3, they have two moves. They have e5 and they have e6. Once again, they can play g6, and in these positions, I always like bishop e5 to take it, to play h3. If they take, you take by queen. If not, you play queen d2, short castle, exchange the dark square bishops, and kill their bishop pair, and carry on in this type of game simply because you have a healthier pawn structure. So I like it a lot for white. And if they don't play like this, that's the game of Grandmaster Buckland from Ukraine, strong GM in his own systems. And after bishop e3, I especially like the following game. It's one of my most favorite game. I saw that game. It was played in Greece like 30 years ago. Krum Gergiev, an attractive GM who even beat Kasparov in one of the Olympiads, was white, against big Anthony Miles. So take a look at the following game. You're going to find it extremely interesting. So e6. And I have so many moves. h3, I played against international master Vojinovic and I drew. I was winning. I won a couple of games. But ever since I saw this game, I always played d5. And now after d5, they got to take, and play knight e5. I mean, they don't have to always go with this. They can play something else. But in this game, black opted for knight e5 because you simply don't believe something wrong might happen here. And Krum Gergiev played bishop b5. I like this move. In case of bishop d7, he would just take and play bishop d4 with control of the center, sending message to the knight. I apologize. Let's go. Decide what are you going to do with this knight. They gotta take on f3. If c6, you just take on e5. A beautiful queen sack, but already kind of typical. Bishop d1, d takes, b takes, knight c6, knight b4, and now rook to d1. Once again, you have two pieces for the queen, but with the exposed queen, all the pieces on the back rank, especially terribly placed king on d8, all you know what I mean. You have bishop, knight, and pawn once again for the queen, but with a weak king, with undeveloped pieces, complete disharmony in black's game. I believe this should be a matter of technique. But after bishop b5, everybody would play knight f to d7 because nobody can even, you know, like guess, believe, or assume what might happen here. So knight takes c5. And one might say, okay, I've seen lots of ideas like this, sacking the queen for 2 pieces, but I don't see what to do afterwards, because after king e7, 2 pieces are hanging, and this time if you simply take on d1 and they take on e5, somehow bishop is hanging, we gotta move the bishop, they will play f6, solidify themselves, and there is no attack. Here Krumgergiev was so, you know, like creative and came up with a beautiful move. It's one of my most favorite ideas, and to be honest with you, I've never seen a similar game with a similar type of idea. Knight c6 check. And I was like, what the hell? He was like, d takes, of course, and this one. And all of a sudden you realize that he was threatening mate. So his only piece for the queen, but he actually threatens mate, which tells you that right now this guy cannot defend the d5 square with the bishop, so he simply has to play f6 and give up another piece. So once again, you have a pawn, knight, and the bishop for the queen, and a pretty weak king. And you know what happened now? This guy played king f7, he played knight d5, played castle, played bishop d4 not to give him any bishop f6. This guy played bishop f6 to connect the rooks, took by bishop, and left himself with a beautiful knight. Also bishop on d7 does a great job because he can never play this, and he can only place the rook on the open file. But this seemingly good knight at this point, after you play b3, all of a sudden looks terrible. So look at this. You have 2 pieces, centralized rooks, he's got a possibly weak king, and he absolutely can't move any of his pieces. He's kind of, you know, like moveless or simply clueless what to do and how to complete development. This game continued to, you know, like go like this: c4, rook a5, rook e2, doubling these rooks. He now sacked, and after this, now this should be a matter of technique, because 2 rooks and the bishop against the queen, that means nothing with the pawn on c6 and the bad rook, and also possibly weak king, and these pawns that cannot be even used as any kind of weapon because they're broken, they're just weak. You shouldn't be worried about this game. White went on to win this game very easily. Hopefully you like this one, and let me now just show you the main line and simply to complete this variation and complete this lecture. And we checked g6 where you played g6, bishop b5. We checked e6 where you played my favorite move d5. Let's go with e5. There are a bunch of people who play this, you know, like as their regular openings. Grandmaster Apicella from France, International Master Mestrovich from Croatia. Then you have FIDE Master from my city, Terzic. They like to play like this. You gotta play bishop b5. You gotta play bishop b5. The point of bishop b5 is that they will never be able to go with this because you simply take on e5, and now you wanna take on d8 and take on e5. They gotta give up the bishop, and you just play short castle. Playing a game like this, I don't want to discuss this with you. This is exactly my game against Terzic like three years ago. I won. It was a blitz game. Another thing in this position, after you go with bishop b5, you're just pinning this knight, and having this bishop on b5, it's basically aimed against any takes d4. You just go with queen d4. Once again, it's my game against Terzic from a blitz game in my city. After like queen d7, you just go queen a4, and even a6 wouldn't give them better chances. Now we threaten knight d4. Now they have to go like this, and now you have the bishop pair. Now you have like nice pin. a6 is not gonna give them an easier time because the rook on a8 is hanging, and white is just so much better. And finally, if they go bishop e7 here, you just go h3. They probably will go back with the bishop here. If they take, you just capture, and you have the bishop pair. Of course, because the knight is threatening to take the queen. You go back with the queen, play bishop e2 to defend on f3, play long castle, put the rook on the open g file, and go after the king on g8. After h3, bishop d7, now they just want to take the queen. You take on c6. You now, after this move, play queen to d3. It's very nice when to go with this retreating queen d3 move, going with the knight d4 and chasing the light square bishop away. After castles, long castles, play knight d4, you go after the bishop and go with g4. Now I want to play with knight f5 to recapture by g pawn and go with the attack along the g file. But I also can recapture by e pawn and do the pawn storm like g5 and g6. Finally, we reach the main line, we reach the main position here, and the main idea just goes with knight d7. Once again, the whole position consists of lots of tricks in this one. And you just go with d5, you kick this knight away, and they have to play knight b8. Once again, there is a big chance for your opponent to make a serious mistake. I won few blitz games like this. They went for knight e7. Looks very logical, you have to admit. But all of a sudden, we have, boom, da-da-da-da, knight e5. Very nice tactics. If you take like this, thank you, I'll take the bishop. If you take my queen, thank you, I'll take on d7. I'll take here, bishop is inevitable, and I'm winning a piece. I won few games like this. And finally, if d5, they give it up, like this, lots of, like players in the past went for this, because they see the point of knight e7, knight e5. I just have a long castle. I'm just gonna push all these pawns onto the king's side, and I believe I'm easily better with the bishop pair at the same time. Eventually, we gotta check the main line. Main line goes with knight cb8, and here I'll show you, and I chose one very interesting correspondence game. You play h3. As you know, on any bishop f3, we take by queen, play queen g3, and if they go castles, we go h4. We have the bishop pair, and we have a potential attack on the king's side. If they go with g6, we just go h4 and h5, and they have lots of problems against our possible attack, and of course, they're pretty weak position of the king. When you play h3 and they go with the bishop h5, you always have to chase this bishop away and play h4. Right now, we're threatening to win the bishop. If h6, we just go h5 and g5, once again chasing that bishop away. If they go h5, which would be my reaction if I was black, g5, bishop e7. This position reminds me of Alekhine defense, one of the main positions and one older line where white has an amazing score. And all you have to understand about this position is how to play against it. You're going to play on the fact that I can't play simple short castle because h5 is going to be weak. So you play knight d2. You want to play queen e2, but maybe you also want to play bishop e2 going after the pawn on h5. After c6, you go bishop e2. Now, for the rest of the game, they will be having problems and they won't be able to make castle. Knight b6, you play rook g1. Knight d7, you play a4, old positional rule. When the knight is on the rim of the board on b6, chase it away with a4 and a5. When the knight is on g6, chase it away with h4 and h5. So in this position, they went with a4 and knight c4. What for? He just wants to get better control of the queen side and to simply remove these pieces onto the queen side, exchange one of the knights, and make his position even easier for playing. After knight takes b6, knight b6, queen d2, rook c8, long castles, short castles. Now he went rook d on f1. He wants to break with f4. That's more than obvious. He did it here. Rook takes f4. He took by pawn, and I'll be honest with you. With the rook on c8, queen on c7, knight here, and bishop here, at first glance, this position looks kind of shaky for our king. White won this game in just 6 moves from now. Keep in mind that the rook on f4 prevents knight c4 altogether with these two pieces. Then another thing, he doesn't have a possibility to attack c2 weakness. And finally, he can jump anywhere with this knight. So the thing is, because knight a4, you just take by rook. That rook on f4 is a monster in terms of defensive resources. Bishop f8. Maybe at some point he just wants to do something like this. Rook g3, overprotecting everything. Rook e5, bishop d4. Rook e7, bishop d3. Finally, he's exchanging the bishop. After this, he played queen d1. He doesn't want to give up bishop for the knight. Playing bishop g6, bishop for the bishop, which is a very important idea here. Bringing the rook back and threatening now h5. Going with rook gg1, so this guy can never go with any rook e1 idea. And playing queen h5. Believe it or not, black immediately resigned, because he was clearly down a pawn. Without any compensation, you're just going to bring the queen back and start pushing the pawns onto the king side. I believe that with this lecture, I just help you in choosing like the most reliable lines against the Nimzowitsch, against Colorado, some weird variations with the knight on c6 on Scandinavian and Perunovic defense, and let me just get your feedback about the lines that I just presented in this video. Thanks again for donations, and let's carry on improving our chess. Bye bye, guys.